You know, it's been, we've touched on several topics over the last, well, it's now over 3 hours that you've been here. We appreciate your time going through that. I just want to touch base on several of those and then maybe have some time ask a question or two at the end as well. You know, as we spoke earlier this week, I think it's critical that the USTR help ensure that USMCA is fully implemented, and particularly that the dispute resolution process is being enforced and followed through the agreement, and obviously in several areas, but you know, especially with Canada on labor or on dairy, as was mentioned earlier, and as well as Mexico with agriculture and energy, which also has come up previously. You know, in the last Congress, we worked really hard to pursue and pass this strengthened trade agreement with the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and USMC was a massive win for farmers and manufacturers and entrepreneurs and small businesses and consumers, and so we just need to make sure that we implement it fully and make sure we get the benefits out of that. And you know, when an agreement like USMC is enforced correctly, it's a great boost, critical boost, but when not, it can lead to outcomes that don't provide those benefits. In addition to the USMCA enforcement, I also wanted to highlight that we need to continue to work with our trading partners around the globe. We need to make sure that all of our trading agreements are vigorously upheld, including protecting companies from forced technology transfers and intellectual theft, and particularly ensuring countries like China follow through on the promises they've made. I'm especially concerned about the continuing talks, and as we've mentioned earlier, about the federal government in my view, taking intellectual property, such as the vaccines, from the rightful owners. We have to be careful in that regards. You know, we wouldn't consider it appropriate to take food out of the field of farmers because that was needed by some people, or we have a lot of auto dealers in Congress. We wouldn't consider taking cars from them because some people don't have transportation to a doctor. So it's a slippery slope that we're concerned about. The United States' greatest single market, and we want to make sure that the American marketplace is not necessarily a right for every company, but it's a privilege for the nations that uphold international order and follow through on promises they've made. And it's essential that we make sure that we follow through on normal trade relations and most favored nation status, that our partners through that process adhere to international trade agreements and international order. You know, and we've seen the consequences of that with the Russia invasion of Ukraine, and obviously that's an impact that they need to face. I just want to wrap up before questions, is that, you know, it was pretty disappointing to see the TPA elapse through the administration, you know, without a plan to renew it. You know, as we all know, the legislative branch has delegated trade responsibility to the executive branch, and we want to make sure that the administration, you know, uses the template that, you know, we have that's been so successful, USMCA, and available to work with future agreements with the UK and India, and you know, without TPA, we can't go forward with trade deals. So also, just making sure that we expand markets for farmers and producers, and clearly make sure that process goes forward. I've touched base on a lot of things that have already been talked about. One of the things that I did want to have a question about, and actually just a reference that was mentioned earlier, and I don't know if you have any more that you want to add to it, about where are we with the WTO process and reform, and I know I've kind of talked too long to give you much more time to talk about that.
Well, Mr. Estes, thank you for touching on all of the things that matter to you. They also matter to me as well. Let me just say one thing about TPA before I get to your actual question. I'm sorry if I'm going to burn a little bit of time here, but on the TPA and its use for USMCA, I actually think that highlighted a little bit some of the limitations for the template approach to TPA. I know TPA matters to all of you, many of you. It therefore will matter to me too, and I look forward to resuming that conversation going forward. On the WTO process, look, the WTO is an absolutely critical institution worldwide, including for what it represents, which is a membership organization that covers almost all of the world, that establishes not just rules, but also norms, and creates communication channels and forums for conversations to deal with difficult issues that come up. We cannot walk away from the WTO. Nevertheless, the WTO has been around for almost 30 years now, and this is a very different world from the one where the WTO was born. The WTO needs reform. It is going to be hard. We are committed to doing that work with you and with our trading partners at the WTO.
Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for the indulgence.